Okay. Right. This is Telepathy and the Transference of Thoughts, January 1976. Many practical thinking people in the modern world, although accepting that thought transference or telepathy does seem to happen to some, they give it very little thought and either put it down to some kind of coincidence or dismiss the subject from their minds altogether. It does, of course, happen most frequently between two people who are close to each other in affection and sequence of thought, not so much between strangers and mere acquaintances. It's a physical proved fact, however, and is commonplace between some of the higher planed beings who exist in other planets, where it's developed to a higher degree, to such an extent that it would amaze and dismay most people living on this planet. It must be realized by all those who wish to think in any way seriously on this subject that anyone who has ever had any kind of communication from a spiritual being, similar to the recipient of this message herself, that no language is spoken between spiritual beings, as not being physical, they have no vocal cords with which to speak, and yet their communications travel freely and effortlessly between them, even between those in the physical world. Emotions such as love, pleasure, fear, hatred, joy, and many others are usually clearly displayed without any communication whatsoever. All this, to any intelligent, deep-thinking person, must be a clear physical proof of the spirit cells within the physical bodies of those in this world. There is, of course, a complete spiritual body, similar in appearance to the physical body, but not visible on the physical plane. The presence of some kind of spiritual being can often be intuitively and sometimes even physically felt by the living, and many people have given accounts of this. This feeling of something or someone unseen is often concerned with some deep emotion felt by the spiritual being who has come for some special reason. The emotions are all part of the spirit and continue to be felt and experienced as much in the spiritual life as they do in the physical. If these emotions, strong feelings, that are a very important part of the transfer of thought from one mind to another, just as a strong emotion is almost a physical thing without need of words, it has already been mentioned in previous communications given for the book that spiritual agencies have the power to place, by this same thought transference, ideas and messages directly into the mind of a living person. This is all one and the same thing. Very often dead relatives may do this, either to help a loved one still living, or to further some desire of their own, something not carried out by themselves in their lifetime, and subsequently regretted. Sometimes they can see a threatened danger and try to give a warning, and many people can think of examples of this. Sometimes they try to bring comfort to a distressed loved one in some way, just as they might have done had they still been living a physical life. Let it be understood that this telepathy or transference of thought is exactly the same process, whether it comes from a living physical person or a spiritual person on the other side. So at the same time, my mother asked the question, is music telepathically fed into the receptive mind? And the answer was always. Only certain people are receptive to music. These are special musical people sent into the world to bring this particular kind of comfort to mankind. I believe that the Red Priest, or Vivaldi, who worked and composed for the Pietà in Venice in the 1700s, is now the modern performer and songwriter Ed Sheeran, and that Nigel Kennedy, the amazingly talented violinist, was once Amadeus Mozart. Both men write very different music today, but if they were to read about their previous lives, they would understand a lot of their present-day thinking and motivations. Also, Purcell is one of my very favourite composers. He was married, but was had been ordained as a church minister. And not much is known about his life, but he wrote lovely music in Elizabeth I's time. And then I've been told he's also Handel. And he's now, he's living now, but he he does different sort of music now, but he's done some very beautiful, I can't think of his name for the moment, but he's done some very beautiful programs about the mathematics behind music. Very often people who are very good at music are very good at mathematics as well. So this is another little bit. This is my comment as well. Before I leave this chapter on telepathy, I must mention another example that I found in Alexander David Neal's book, Magic and Mystery in Tibet. I've given this book to several people, actually. Nobody's finished it. But anyway, I thought it was fascinating. Miss Neal recorded an incident that happened while she was travelling in Tibet in the early 1920s. For safety, it was advisable to always travel with others to avoid being set upon by any bandits that might attack lone travellers and rob them. On one such occasion, she travelled with a group, and among them was a tall tribesman who stood out due to his bright red turban and heavy gold earrings. He told her that he was travelling to a distant village to perform a bonpa, or spiritual ceremony, to remove an evil spirit that was plaguing a certain village. Miss Neal expressed an interest and asked that she might accompany him and observe this ceremony. The tribesman said that on no account should she come, as her presence there would endanger the success of the ceremony and may cause actual harm. He told her that he would shortly be leaving the group and would make his way alone to the village. Miss Neal thought privately that she would allow him to think that he had left them, and then she and her adopted son, Lama Yomden, would follow him at a distance and observe the ceremony in secret. The thought had hardly formed in her head before the tribesman informed her of the fact that he was aware of her plan and that he would warn the chief of the village that she was intending to follow him and ruin the bonfire. Within a matter of hours, around 20 mounted villagers descended upon them to accompany the mysterious red-turbaned seer back with them. They begged her not to try to follow them and left generous presents of prayer flags, yak's butter and tea as a goodwill gesture. However, she was quite sure that if she had not accepted their gifts and tried to ignore their request, they might have killed her. But this man's ability to read another's mind and then send a clear warning to the chief of the village some distance away, so that he sent a party of men to warn her off, was remarkable. The only way that most of us would be able to perform anything like such a feat would be by text on a mobile phone, and then only if there was decent network coverage. In the East, they are very aware of the existence of the third eye, and most people in India wear a mark in the centre of their forehead to denote its presence. In the dictation above, it states that the emotions are part of our spiritual selves, something very few of us consider. Modern Western medicine only looks at the physical body and mostly pays no attention to the chakras and the meridians present in the body. Neither do the majority of our doctors realize that these are the connections of the soul and the spiritual body to our earthly physical bodies, and that our spiritual bodies are multidimensional, and it's reckoned that the brain exists on as many as 7 spiritual planes. However, with regard to this thought transference and our extrasensory perception, the third eye, knowledge of which is very scanty in the West, is the principal medium by which these thoughts transferences reach our consciousness. The nose is a much more complicated organ than it appears. All the chakras or power centers in the body are represented in it. The heart is the only... That's a very good reason why your nose would fall off if you were to get something like syphilis or leprosy. Anyway, hopefully that won't happen. The nose is a much more complicated organ than it appears. All the chakras or power centers in the body are represented in it. The heart is the only organ that has 2 meridians. The end of the nose, that's this bit here, being part of the pericardium or heart master, and around the nostrils, the emotional heart, is represented. Internally, the nose is governed by the lung, but also the autonomic nervous system, one aspect being fright and flight, and the other being a the calming, relaxing side. These 2 aspects of the nervous system are governed by the breath, which is in turn is governed by our emotions, in that when we are calm, our breathing is slower and deeper, and when we are frightened or excited, it's shallower and faster. These 2 channels cross at the bridge of the nose and pass into the forehead, back into the hypothalamus to make the third eye. A casual glance at the hypothalamus shows that it has the appearance of an eye with the little pineal gland at one corner. The pineal gland is often included in the crown chakra, but both the third eye and the crown chakra are ethereal organisms and part of the spirit. The hypothalamus is sometimes referred to as the eye of Horus. Just what is the real story there? What happened to Horus when he lost his eye, and how did it affect him? But so often those of us who are more than a little perceptive about our fellow man and the world around us will know instinctively that others are deceiving us, or that someone is unhappy, or that a situation is not as it seems. So although Alexander David Neal's tribesman would still leave us all in the shade when it comes to thought transference, most of us are not without this gift in a small way which helps us in our lives. Perhaps if the Western world were not so busy and we had more time for self-contemplation and meditation, we could develop that side of ourselves to a greater extent. And the other thing which is interesting is, I think it was Mercury's caduceus, isn't it? You know, a lot of the old books have said that a lot of this old knowledge is in plain sight. So the caduceus, it is the extraordinary instrument that Mercury seemed to carry, which was like a spear. So it had two wings at the top, and then serpents going down, and the spear sort of appeared like an arrow, and he sort of carried this. So basically, it says that it's believed that the third eye has two wings. So my Indian picture at home shows a man with what looks like wavy eyebrows, but actually they're wings. And then when this energy goes up the nose and back into the hypothalamus, it then goes down the spine like that. And serpents are always thought of as knowledge, goes down from the brain, from the hypothalamus, down to the base chakra, which is very important and supports everything else. So that's the meaning of Mercury's caduceus. So there you go, that's finished.